On the first day of April 1919, the Thiele family, three in all, arrived in Waterloo, Ontario from New York. Professor Thiele had accepted a one-year contract with the Waterloo Band at $1,200 per annum. For the family, a new era had begun. For the members of the Canadian band fraternity, it was more than a new era. It was to be, rather sooner than later, a complete refit. The dynamo that was Professor C.F. Thiele was more than a cornetist conductor. He was a composer, an educator, a showman, an entrepreneur, a businessman, and a visionary. Oh yes, and he was completely unknown. The Lower East Side of Manhattan, where on Mott Street in the Bowery in 1884, Charles Frederick Thiele was born. His mother was a third-generation German-American. His father, a newly arrived German immigrant who spoke only German. The young CF showed an early aptitude for music, and since he grew up in the German part of the Bowery, a neighborhood that valued music highly, his talents were quickly noted by his family and chums. He mastered the cornet easily. Now married, he was hired by many marching bands, playing lead cornet for politicians and fraternal organizations across Lower Manhattan. In the good weather, every day, sometimes 3 or 4 marches from the Battery to Central Park. Playing in countless parades for political rallies while concentrating on his studies, rudiments, and composition gave him little sense of accomplishment. He wished to be in a smaller town where he could realize his potential. He made friends with staff at the Carl Fisher Publishing Company, started in 1872 by a German immigrant, and that was his contact with the band world fraternity. A request from Rumford, Maine, to find a conductor to take charge of the senior band and 2 junior bands came to Thiele's attention. He applied and got the position. The family left New York for New England. He had very good results when taking over the direction of 3 bands in Mumford, Maine. He also developed a musical theater company in Mumford. He was held in high esteem. And then World War I was tearing up Europe. And in 1917, America declared war on Germany. Public hysteria erupted in the States against all German Americans. The town canceled his contract and immediately demanded that he leave. Returning to New York, he checked at Carl Fisher and found that Danville, Illinois advertised for a music director. He took the post, but in 1919, an influenza epidemic spread all across North America. Danville, Illinois canceled all town concerts, and the Illinois State Fair did not open. The band program was terminated, and once again, the Thiele family returned to New York City. Thiele called in at Carl Fisher and was told they had just received a posted ad from Waterloo, Canada, requesting applications for a bandmaster. Thiele quickly responded, and after the interview was offered a one-year contract. The family fortunes had turned positive. When he began in Waterloo, he used his experiences in Maine and Illinois to organize the Waterloo bands, senior and junior. He quickly showed his varied talents as entrepreneur, showman, businessman, educator, and organizer. In his first years in Waterloo, he organized the Ontario Amateur Band Association, became president, and then negotiated agreement with the Canadian National Exhibition to sponsor a big band competition every August. He allied with Seagram's Distillery, a Waterloo-based company, and began park concerts in the Seagram Band Shell every summer. He joined forces with Carl Fisher in New York to be the Canadian distributor of silent movie music, and then formed a company, Waterloo Music, to accommodate the library. When talkies came in, he switched Waterloo to retail and publishing educational scores. In 1932, for the band's Golden Jubilee, he produced a gala concert which became annual as the Waterloo Music Festival. He put together the Canadian Bandmasters Association and installed Captain John Slater as the first president. When 2 Canadian music magazines went out of circulation, Professor Thiele bought them both and restarted publication. Soon after organizing the bands in Waterloo, Professor Thiele got a telegram from his friend Max at the New York publisher Carl Fisher explaining how profitable the selling of silent movie music had become. Max offered the professor rights to be the distributor for Canada in a tie-in with Fisher. Thiele accepted the offer and began to receive large shipments of scores and parts to be sent to Canadian theaters. The demand for orders across Canada outgrew his storage space. He leased a downtown store and realized he needed some staff. He picked a 14-year-old boy from the junior band named Fred Moak. Fred became Thiele's right hand, and the professor discovered that Fred's sense of business matched his own. Fred worked as number 2 for Thiele for 33 years and became the new president of Waterloo Music when the professor retired. Fred Moog also composed, and this is Fred's On Parade. Back in his marching through Manhattan days, Professor Thiele, through a friend Max at Carl Fisher Publishing, was able to meet the biggest stars in the band world, Sousa and Pryor. Now, as the figurehead of the band capital of Canada, he was able to invite to the festival the current big names in banding. He featured E.F. Goldman of the New York Goldman Band and Frank Simon of the Armco Band frequently. Simon was the greatest cornet virtuoso of his time, and whenever he came to Waterloo, he would perform his brilliant showpiece, Napoli. In 1949, open cornet competition at the Waterloo Music Festival, the winner of the most trophies was a 15-year-old from Guelph, Ontario, named Freddie Mills. 2 decades later, he was the principal trumpet in the National Arts Centre Orchestra and one of the founders of the Canadian Brass. Professor Thiele had a long-held dream of founding a summer music camp for talented young musicians. His dream was realized in 1946 when the camp at Bamberg opened. He named his good friend and bandmate Dr. Charles O'Neill, former director of the Van Du's celebrated band, as camp director. Professor Thiele's motto was, "Every student is a potential bandmaster." During this tribute to Canada's own music's man, we have not mentioned his composing mainly marches, but some instrumental solo pieces. This is a collection of his marches. Professor Thiele was truly a one-of-a-kind music man, as well as being a visionary, take-chances kind of businessman, a showman entrepreneur whose programs were always big hits. He was part Pied Piper and part an honest Harold Hill.